This is The Toss Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of college sports and give a little bit of history behind some of them. We're not trying to change your mind, we just want to dive deeper into the topics that keep you tuned in to the teams you love. In the 19th century, college students began forming sporting clubs. Yale and Harvard held the first intercollegiate athletics competition when their rowing clubs faced off in 1852. Since then, college sports has expanded into a billion-dollar industry with individual athletic departments having budgets over $100 million. With so much attention on varsity sports, people can sometimes forget about their origin, club sports, even though an estimated 2 million college students participate in them nationwide. Why is this? All right, let's pull it out to the panel. Oh, I'm Austin Matricardi, your host. Over here to my right, I've got WIUX co-sports director Eddie Cotton, and to my left, the IUS TV sports reporter Christian Luna. So, Christian, why do you think club sports get overlooked?
Well, if you want to look at it in the grand scheme of things, varsity sports have really started to become the main focal point for a couple of reasons. One is because definitely the media has been a big part of that. The reason why people see these sports in the varsity level because they're represented well. Another reason is certainly the level of competition. When you compare varsity to club, you can definitely notice the little bit of lack in competition between the two.
That's true, that's true. Another answer has to be the money, right? Because varsity sports is where the money is at. If you look at the NCAA, billions of dollars. Eddie, what do you think?
I think that's not exactly fully true. If you look at varsity sports, you've got maybe one or two sports per school that actually bring in that revenue. If you're looking at the NCAA, to be specific, they bring in all their money from the March Madness tournament. They bring in over $900 million a year. So why do we have 22 other sports at a school? Why do we focus on other sports? Because they deserve the opportunity to contribute and the opportunity to play. And if you're looking at club sports and that media coverage which you mentioned,
right.
Don't you think if we covered club sports that people actually would start caring?
Yeah, certainly.
That's true, because just like any varsity team, club teams could have storylines too. You see coverage of, IU basketball, for instance. There's all kinds of storylines. I'm sure that if you covered any other club team, then, that you'd find storylines there.
Of course.
So, we have club sports here at IU. We actually have over 40 of them, actually, from, martial arts. We've got rugby, hockey. We have 2 hockey teams, actually. So there has to be some kind of benefit to having these sports on campus. What do you think those are?
Well, definitely a benefit is that it allows its participants to continue playing at a lower level of competition as compared to the varsity sports, as well as it's a less of a commitment than it would be to be in a varsity sport. Varsity sport is just like having a job on top of going to school. Being in a club allows you to kind of work that into your schedule, be a little bit more flexible, and allow you to do more things that you would like to outside of sports and school.
That's true, especially that point about varsity sports being almost like having a job. The average NCAA Division I athlete spends 40 hours a week on just athletics and then another 40 on academics, which is just mind-blowing. But, Eddie?
I mean, some other thoughts that you have to think about is just the camaraderie that a club sport creates. If you're trying to create a dynamic student body with all these different opinions, relationships, you've got to look at different clubs, organizations, and club sports. Teams bring people together, and they allow people to feel a part of something bigger than they are. And that's why club sports are vital to any school's production.
That's true. Another reason that club sports is so great is because it's a great way to stay in shape. Helps you combat that freshman 15 when you're coming out of high school.
Of course.
Obviously, the club sports model is extremely different than that of the varsity sports model. How do they stack up?
Well, if you kind of look at it from a point of view of the administration, a lot of the club sports are ran just by the students themselves. You'll often see a couple of clubs having participants in the sports actually be their coaches. So as far as looking through administration and boosters and where the money is coming to actually fund these groups, they just can't quite stack up.
That's true, that's true. Eddie?
Well, you're 100% right with that, but do you think that's a problem? Do you think that we need to see more boosters coming in to try and fund these club sports? Do you think that it's an entity that actually could grow over time? Or is it justified the way that these sports are underfunded and are contributed to by pretty much the players?
That's true. And another huge difference between the two models is that time commitment that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And some sports that are currently club sports might want to try to be varsity sports. They might try to change and go over to the other model. One example is Ultimate Frisbee. There was a movement not too far or long ago that people were trying to get Ultimate Frisbee to be an NCAA recognized sport. So should varsity or club sports be able to become varsity sports?
I mean, I don't see why not, as long as they look at the long list of regulations they have to follow, as long as they can get the proper funding, if they can hire a big enough staff, if they could follow Title IX regulations, if they could follow NCAA academic regulations, then sure. If you got athletes that, like you said, want to put in that time commitment of 40 hours a day, then yeah, sure. You got plenty of varsity sports waiting to happen. But you don't exactly have that many people dedicated to the sports to create them. That's the issue.
The thing that I see as interesting is that we've seen this work the other way because, with Title IX, we've seen some men's non-revenue sports, wrestling at some schools, rugby at some schools, they've been regressed to like a club status instead of being full varsity, especially men's gymnastics too. Christian, do you think they should be able to evolve?
Absolutely. If the competition is there and it's there on a consistent semester to semester basis, why not? There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be able to, besides the reasons that Eddie brought up earlier. There's just no reason why they shouldn't be able to.
That's true. That's true. If they want to compete, let them compete.
Now, do you see a problem with there being too many varsity sports? Would there be an issue with like a school such as Ohio State that has all of their sports be a varsity sport? Would that lead to just an overpopulated amount of teams, players, sports, and amount of people that you have to keep under these NCAA regulations? Or do you think we should just freeload and throw them all in a bus and say, here, we've got 50 varsity sports? What do you think?
I think that's really just up to the discretion of, the administration if they really want to deal with all that work. Obviously with IU we have 40 club sports, like we mentioned before. Why not divvy that down to the students, let them kind of get their hands involved on some of the administrative duties.
All right, that's valid. Club sports could have some pretty good players, but could they be a potential talent pool for varsity teams? Baker Mayfield was an intramural sports legend at Oklahoma before he became a Heisman finalist quarterback for the Oklahoma Sooners. He played softball, he played basketball. He wasn't necessarily great at all of them, but he was just a freak athlete.
I don't see why not. If you're a coach at the varsity level and you're not willing to look every means possible to try and find talent, you're not doing your job. They're looking at sixth graders when they recruit. Why wouldn't they want to look at intramural athletes? If you're seeing a situation where your team is lacking depth, they're lacking athletes, go to the intramural level. Sure, you should be looking everywhere. You should be looking under the sofa. You should be looking in my chair right now. You should be asking me if I could play. So I don't see why not.
That's true. You should leave no stone unturned as a coach, especially if you want your team to be great.
Right. If you're that desperate to really find a player, why not? And if the competition and the player is bringing that much attention to that competition he's playing in, or she, there's no reason as to why they shouldn't be able to do that. And the worst case scenario of the situation is really that they're just going to say no, and you can just move on to the next one.
Now, the one issue with looking into the club sport level for talent is mentality. And I think that's the biggest thing with all varsity athletes that holds some back and keeps some involved is, are you willing to give it that 40 hours? Are you willing to give up some of your free time that a club sport offers to be that dedicated to a varsity level? Right. But if you are, you have the opportunity to make that jump if you are talented enough and you try hard enough, and a coach should be looking after you.
That's true. That's true. And nowadays, we see talent coming from all over the place. We see people coming from overseas. Coaches are going out and they're recruiting people in Australia. They're going over and they're looking over in Europe and stuff like that. They're, putting managers on the bench in uniforms when your team gets low enough. So why not?
Why not?
Right. That's exactly right.
All right, that does it for our show this week. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you might have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. Until next Sunday, be proud and cheer loud.